Hello, History of St. Louis, and today it's part two of our cemeteries look. Yesterday we took a look at Bell Fountain Cemeteries. You should have a completed worksheet on that by now. A couple little additions that I need you to add for that one. Somewhere on the top, I need you to jot down the word non-denominational. Bell Fountain Cemetery is non-denominational, meaning that it will host any religion. And in fact, there are all types of religions buried there: Judaism, Christian, Islam. I've even seen some feng shui and some Buddhist uh, grave sites there. So just know that it is non-denominational, and then today's is going to be a little different. I think that's the only thing I needed to wrap up. So today we're going to take a look at Calvary Cemetery. So if you go to the second sheet of the cemetery fact sheet, you should see Calvary Cemetery. And I'm going to give you some statistics here to write down in just a second. Let me just quickly tell you the story here. In 1849, the cholera epidemic struck St. Louis, as we've already studied, and claimed the lives of more than 4,000 people. That actually, the number should be around 7,000. This disaster prompted city officials to pass an ordinance banning the creation of new cemeteries within the city limits, as it was thought that the measure could prevent additional people from becoming sick. Remember, they actually thought that dead bodies was possibly causing cholera to spread. At the same time, existing cemeteries in St. Louis were nearly full and had no room to expand. Recognizing the need for a new rural Catholic cemetery, Archbishop Peter Richard Kenrick purchased Senator Henry Clay's Old Orchard Farm in 1853, located several miles northwest of the city of St. Louis. Kenrick initially set aside the eastern half of the 323-acre farm for a new cemetery and kept the western half for himself, where he lived for many years in the former Clay Mansion. Calvary Cemetery would be open for burials in 1854 with Archbishop Kenrick as its first president. And so it will open also as a rural cemetery. So the setup is very much like Bell Fountains, where there are no rows and columns. It's just by lot, and then you have to walk around that lot to find the gravesite of family members and whatnot. As far as here is the entrance to Calvary Cemetery. Again, looks a little bit like it did with Bell Fountain. Some facts that you need to jot down. Currently, it's 477 acres. So out of the two cemeteries, Calvary is larger. It has also over 315,000 burials compared to 88,000 in Bell Fountain. So it is much larger in size as a cemetery, and know that they have plenty of room for more. The first burial in Calvary was 1854, and it is the second oldest Catholic cemetery in St. Louis. Unfortunately, I do not have with me what is the oldest. Again, here is a close-up look at the entrance to Calvary. Calvary Cemetery is going to be Catholic. They do have some non-Catholics buried there in conjunction with family members who are buried there that were Catholic. And slaves could be buried there along with, if they so chose. So jot down at the top of your Calvary worksheet that this is a Catholic cemetery. Part of this property had been used as an ancient burial ground by Native Americans, and soldiers from the nearby Fort Bellefontaine were also interred there. After its purchase, these remains were collected and buried in a mass grave under a large crucifix. Unfortunately, I don't have that gravesite in today's video. So one of the most famous grave sites, and you'll jot this down for number one, is the site, the Dred Scott grave site. Originally, when he was finally buried here in Calvary, he was buried in an unmarked grave. But then later on in the 1950s, A black-owned business in St. Louis decided to change that and sponsored the gravesite of what you're going to see today. In fact, I'm going to switch over here in just a second and show you what the gravesite looks like. So here is the gravesite of Dred Scott. All of this was created in the 1950s, as you can read right here. In memory of a simple man who wanted to be free, Dred Scott, dedicated by the African Historical and Genealogical Research Society, donated by the Eddie Randall and Sons Funeral Home. So they laid this stone, they laid this stone, and then they also laid a stone for his wife, but I believe that his wife was buried in another cemetery at another location. I am sorry about the sideways shot, so I apologize, but we'll flip back here in just a second. And so here is a little shot about the Dred Scott. And then on the back side of this headstone gives a little bit about the history of the Dred Scott case and why he is famous in American history. So we will pick up with our look at Calvary Cemetery where we left off. All right, so gravesite number 2, let's go ahead and gravesite number 2 is going to be that of Thomas Biddle and his wife. Remember, we studied Thomas Biddle when discussing Bloody Island a couple lessons ago. Thomas Biddle and Spencer Pettis will be the duel that gives Bloody Island the nickname Bloody Island, because they dueled at 5 feet apart, and the end result of their duel was quite bloody. You're going to find out who his wife is and then why he was able to get this gravesite. So there he is, Thomas Biddle, held a number of jobs in the St. Louis area. And so that arched mausoleum is where he and his wife are buried. They are buried, if you were to walk underneath that arch, the walls of the 2 archways are where they are buried. So they are buried inside of the walls. Unfortunately, it was closed to visitors shortly after they built this for unknown reasons. But as you can see here, I kind of zoom in here. Here is where his wife, Ann Biddle, is buried, and you'll see that she is actually the daughter of John Malamphy. And so she's part of the Malamphy inheritance. And so then here is where Thomas Biddle is buried. He would have been buried here first, and then his wife buried later on. And you can see they have a dome at the top. So it's a pretty ornate building as far as architecture goes, but it is protected because I think there are some issues with its structural integrity. Number 3, and probably one of the most famous grave sites in Calvary, is General William Tecumseh Sherman, famed general for the Civil War, probably behind U.S. Grant, probably the most famous general in the Civil War. He does live in St. Louis for a short period of time, and I think during that time, one of their children died and was buried here, and so that is why the rest of the family was buried here. They did not live here for very long. There is a picture of William T. Sherman. And then his gravesite actually includes he, his wife, and then I believe 3 children, possibly 4. So the American flag is right there in front as you approach the gravesite. William Tecumseh Sherman's gravesite is right here with the flags crisscrossing one another. I believe his wife is right here to the right, and then child over here. And so you can see that it's decorated with some military honors and military awards to signify who he was, and that he was an award-winning general. You can see born in Lancaster, Ohio, died in New York City. Here is his daughter, and then another son, I believe, uh, who died, uh, who was born in St. Louis, and therefore that's why they were buried here. And then his 9-year, this is his wife, and then this is the so this is his wife, and then his 9-year-old son who died from tuberculosis while visiting him on location at the Civil War. He died when 9 or 10, and so little Willie, as they called him, was buried here as well. And then another child right here. So actually 4 of his children are buried here. And you can see this one did not make it past a year. Actually, probably looks like about 5 months or so. Another one is Antoine Soulard. We studied Antoine Soulard when we talked about Soulard neighborhood earlier this unit. He is the one who is the namesake for the neighborhood. And so he, along with some other members of the Soulard family, there is Antoine Soulard's picture. And so this is the gravesite of Antoine Soulard, pretty simple. There is the footstone with the name of the family. There is Antoine's headstone. You can see that it's starting to decay a little bit. And then some other members of the family and their grave sites have weathered extremely over the time. So just a little mini obelisk. I'd say that's probably about a 5-foot obelisk on top. All right, so now we'll have Auguste Chouteau later on. This is Madame Chouteau and her 4 children who were born with Pierre Laclede as their father. So Auguste Chouteau is going to be buried in a different site than his mother and half-brothers and half-sisters. And it's a pretty nice little setup here. They picked a little hill. That is Pierre Chouteau, the half-brother of Auguste Chouteau, who was the co-founder of St. Louis. They both shared the same mother. So everything on this gravesite is going to be in French. So you have right here the family of Pierre Chouteau in French, and then you can see, because it's built on top of a hill, that they needed to create this massive stone stairway in order to get to the gravesite. At the gravesite, Pierre is going to be at the center of a giant circle, and then his 3 sisters and mother are going to be around him and their families. So right now I am walking toward the gravesite of Pierre Chouteau, and his nameplate and information will be all in French, and so will the information of his sisters and their families as well. So and so this tells you when he was born and when he died. And these are his children around him as well. And then the stone cross. And then that is Madame Chouteau. She is buried by herself. And then the 3 sisters are buried with their family members at various points as well. But this is the gravesite of Madame Chouteau herself. Probably the most famous woman in early St. Louis history. How do you know it's hers? Well, there's her name right there, Therese Bourgeois Chouteau. And her daughters have the same type of sarcophagus. So again, you can see that this has been weathered over time tremendously. Here is a sister, or a daughter, excuse me, of Madame Chouteau, sister of Auguste and Pierre. And you can see that her family is buried around her. And we'll stop and not show you the other sisters since they all are out. The next gravesite is Priest's Lot. So you'll jot down that name. This is the burial site for Archbishop Kenrick and Bishop Kane. We studied Archbishop Kenrick as one of 6 famous religious leaders of St. Louis history. We did not learn that much about, or we didn't learn anything about Bishop Kane, but if you know, there is a high school for girls called Rosati Kane. Bishop Kane comes after Archbishop Kenrick. When Bishop Kane dies, then Archbishop, later Cardinal Glennon, will take over. This is actually a lot, though, besides for Peter Kenrick right there and Bishop Kane. This is also going to be the lot for the burial, and there's Bishop Kane. This is also going to be the lot for the burial sites of about 40 other priests in the St. Louis area. So as you drive up, you can see this huge collection of grave sites. At the top of this little hill is a crucifix with Jesus on it. Here I am at the bottom of the hill, and as you make your way up to the more famous, more well-known leaders. So these were all Catholic priests in the St. Louis area. Here you see again a nice decorative sarcophagus for that priest. And then as you walk up, you have more and more priests and their grave sites. And then at the very top, you have the two main sarcophagus of Kenrick and Kane. So as we approach here, as you get closer to the crucifix, you are more important. So there is Bishop Kane. He is the one who replaces Archbishop Kenrick when he dies. And then Kane will be replaced by Glennon. You can see how the top of the sarcophagus is in the form of a cross. And you can see that it is in Latin, as was the tradition. And then here you can see Archbishop Kenrick. And again, this is in Latin as well. And then his insignia. And then you have the crucifix at the top. And then further down the hill is the nameplates of everybody on Priest's Lot who is buried here. So here is Archbishop Kenrick here's Archbishop Kenrick and Bishop Kane, and then you have the other names listed here as well to let you know who is actually buried on Priest's Lot. So here's our next one, the gravesite of the Melamphys. I was super excited when I saw that they were going to be buried here, and I figured that they would have probably a massive mausoleum just because of how rich they were. But then I forgot that John was very non-showy with his money. And so when I arrived at the gravesite, instead of seeing a giant mausoleum, I instead, here is a picture of John Melamphy and his son, Brian. So when I arrived at their gravesite, I was expecting something much more, and then saw this basically tower-like monument to their family. And so this is the Melamphy gravesite. The front here has been weathered away over time. It had some sort of picture right here that obviously has weathered over time. And then John is buried on the left, and Brian is buried on the right, and then John's wife is buried on the back side. So here is, actually this is Brian's side. And remember, the father and son had a falling out when John died, and Brian was actually kicked out of the inheritance, but the sisters brought them back. Here is the wife and mother, and then here is John Malanthe's side right here. And you can see that the stone has weathered away over time uh, pretty noticeably. And then we have just a famed artistic grave right here. This is nobody important, but it is known as the Weeping Angel. Um, this gravesite is basically a winged angel crying into her arms, and you can see it's lifelike. It is a full body image of the angel weeping into one arm and carrying a flower in the other. Um, you actually see the weeping angel as a uh, popular gravesite uh, gravestone in many of them. This was the Dolan family, obviously from Ireland, and here was a section dedicated to the Irish, and it's flying the Irish flag. Thought that was pretty interesting. The next one is Anne Lucas and her two husbands, Theodore Hunt and Wilson Price Hunt. And so this is a mausoleum that is actually built into the side of a hill. And so the mausoleum is actually underground. And you'll see what I mean here in just a second. So you'll jot down Anne Lucas Hunt and her two husbands. Here is Anne Lucas Hunt. And I believe I have pictures. This is Wilson Price Hunt, her second husband. I do not think I have a picture of her first husband, Theodore Hunt. And so when you arrive, you pull up, you actually pull up to the back side of the mausoleum. And so in order to get to the front side of the mausoleum, you have to walk around this walkway, and then you have to go down a pretty steep set of stairs, and that takes you into the that takes you to the front of their mausoleum. Sorry for the bouncing camera work there. And so as we turn around and come around here, you will see the front of the mausoleum is actually right in front of the hill. The door has been locked, and it used to be open, but I think it had been so weathered that the family put on wood doors so that you could no longer see in. But I sort of jimmy rigged my GoPro video, and as you can see here, I'm going to be able to tuck it right inside and give you a little bit of a view of what it looks like from the inside. Please, only professionals do this. So this is what the inside looks like. So there's actually two rooms. We're in the first room, which is sort of an entry room. And over the door leading back to where they're buried, you have silhouettes of Anne Lucas Hunt and then Wilson Price Hunt, who will be buried on the right, and Theodore Hunt, who will be buried on the left. And so you would walk through this opening, and it would go back a little bit, and then you could make your way right or left to their grave sites. You will also notice that at some time the ceiling was painted a sky blue, and you can see that that paint is very much weathering away. And you can see that just the interior structure is very much weathered over time. But you can see how this must have been a beautiful mausoleum back in its day when it was first created. Here are just a couple of other random grave sites. Children were often buried with a childlike gravestone to signify that they were children when they died. And here are two of those famous ones, the Morrison children. As you can see, one died basically as a baby, and the other one as a smaller infant. And so this one was died at age 5, and I'm not sure how old the baby was when it was. But again, these would have been marble gleaming white, but over time you can see the weather has really weathered the marble so that it looks much different. And so that is a look at Calvary Cemetery. Once again, I hope you're intrigued. Go out and visit these two cemeteries. There are a number of other famous people that are at both that I wasn't able to cover. So make sure that you go make this one of your trips. And I'll talk to you soon.